In the early hours of November 15, 2004, Peter Porco and his wife Joan Porco were sound asleep in their bedroom on Broccoli Drive in Bethlehem, New York. They had no idea what was going to happen. Michael Hart, Peter's co-worker, found him dead at the bottom of the stairs in the morning. Joan, on the other hand, was in serious condition in their bedroom upstairs. One of them had hit the other with an axe more than once. The investigation into the attack went in a lot of different directions that no one saw coming. There were many suspects, and even members of the family became suspicious. The case captivated the community, who longed to know who the killer could be, though the police had their own plans. Who was guilty for the violent attack on Peter and Joan Porco? Why did the person do what they did? And what information did the police use to find the suspect? Hi, and welcome back to our channel. If you are new here, please consider subscribing, as it helps us motivate to create more intriguing content for you. Let's have a look at the gruesome story of a Porco family. Bethlehem is a town in the United States that is in a beautiful area. It is known for having a lively community and a long past. Bethlehem is a great place for outdoor lovers because it has beautiful scenery, rolling hills, and a calm atmosphere. It is close to big towns like Albany, which makes it more appealing as a place to live and visit. On November 14, 2004, this pretty town saw a brutal crime. Peter Porco was born in Norwalk on August 22, 1952. He grew up with his parents, Ralph and Jane Porco. In the 1970s, Peter met Joan Balzano while he was studying law at the University of Albany. Joan was studying speech therapy and also worked at a nearby school. After falling in love, they quickly chose to get married. They made their home on Broccoli Drive in Bethlehem, New York. After 30 years of marriage, they split up in the early 2000s. In 2004, Peter was 52 years old and worked as a clerk in the appellate division of the court. Joan, on the other hand, was a committed speech pathologist for kids. Both of them were involved in their church, but Joan was more devoted to her family than anyone else. These two people had two boys together named Jonathan and Christopher. They had a golden dog that was like a family member. Jonathan worked for the U.S. Navy on a nuclear submarine, and Christopher studied biological engineering and economics at the University of Rochester, near their home. It looked like the Porco family was happy and successful in their cute old house. But on a terrible November morning, everything changed. No one knew there was a strange secret waiting to be found. The alarm clock next to Peter Porco's bed started to go off early on Monday, November 15, 2004, even though it was still dark outside. Peter woke up and reached over to silence the alarm so as not to wake up his wife, Joan, who was sleeping next to him. There was a chill in the air when Peter got out of bed, so he quickly put on a sweater and went down the hall to the main bathroom. Peter stood in front of the bathroom mirror and looked at himself. He had blood all over him, and his face looked different. He did not seem worried or upset about it, which makes me think he was not fully aware of what was going on around him. Nevertheless, Peter continued his usual morning routine, like he did every day. He took out his toothbrush and started cleaning his teeth. There was still blood visible as he went on. Following his completion, he left the toothbrush in the sink and went downstairs to the kitchen to begin getting ready for work. He left blood marks as he moved around, but Peter still did his morning chores like sorting mail, unloading dishes, and getting breakfast from the fridge. He left the house to get the daily newspaper from the front door. He reached for the front door, but it closed and locked behind him, leaving Peter outside his own home. Luckily, he knew there was a spare key hidden under a flower pot. He found the key and used it to get back into the house. On the doorsteps, he saw bigger drops of blood. Peter walked back toward the kitchen after leaving the key in the lock and letting the door close a little. He lost consciousness and tumbled down the stairs because his health deteriorated rapidly. The crime scene was very scary. At the courts, Peter was known as a kind man who always did his job. He had never missed a shift without telling his coworkers. His coworkers became worried when he did not show up for work on November 15, 2004, without giving a reason. They attempted to call the Porco family, but no one answered the phone, so in concern for Peter's safety, coworker Michael Hart visited Peter's house on Broccoli Drive. The house appeared normal from the outside. Michael tried calling the Porco's home number twice, but got no answer. After that, he called his boss, who told him to go to the front door and knock. Michael knew right away that something was wrong as he walked up to the house and knocked. Michael could hear the pit bull's golden dog barking from inside the house while he was outside. Since he was interested, he carefully took a look inside. He felt like he had seen something very scary when he saw what he saw. Michael told his boss in a scared voice that it looked like a crime scene and told him to call an ambulance. Without waiting, he called 911 to tell them what he had found. As soon as the cops got there, they saw something horrifying that no one could have imagined. When he looks down, he sees blood on the concrete steps. Peter Porco's dead body was lying on the concrete floor at the bottom of the stairs. A horrible blow to the head had left him with serious injuries. It was shocking that his skull was partially removed. He was missing his jaws, and his eyes were open but not moving. He had a serious head injury that caused blood to soak through his clothes and cover the walls and some doors inside. There was such shocking horror in the scene that most people who saw it found it hard to talk about. When the police were looking into the crime scene, they saw bloody red footprints that went through the area. Despite his severe injuries, Peter had not died right away, which was even scarier to realize. He was still awake after the attack and aware of his surroundings and the normal things he did every morning. Kevin Robert, a paramedic on shift, was driving his ambulance nearby when he got a scary call about something happening on Broccoli Drive. After rushing to the Porco's house right away, Detective Chris Bowdish, who had already arrived a few minutes earlier, showed him the way to the first floor. Kevin and Detective Bowdish carefully moved around Peter's dead body as they went upstairs to the main bedroom. When they went inside, they saw a horrible scene. Someone found Joan Porco laying flat on the bloody bed. Large amounts of blood were also on the walls and nightstands. Joan had cuts and scrapes on her hands and upper arms, which showed that she had fought back during the attack. Her head had the worst damage. Half of one of her eyes was missing, and the side of her jaw was hanging off of her face. The sight was very scary, and police were able to see her brain. They hit her along the arms with the axe while they were trying to save her life. There was a bloody axe at the foot of the bed, and the cops thought it was the murder weapon. The same axe struck Peter, hitting him 16 times in the head, 13 times more than his wife. This made it look like Peter was the goal. Unbelievable as it may seem, Joan Porco was still alive and aware despite seriously hurt. Police Officer Bowdish was able to understand her even though she could not speak, because she could nod and make hand movements. The police officer asked her if she knew who had attacked her, because he thought Joan's condition might get worse and she might die at any time. Bowdish started to ask Joan to get important information that would help him figure out if the killer was a family member or someone else. While Bowdish asked if a family member was behind the attack, Joan agreed with him. Bowdish already knew that the Porcos had 2 sons because he had talked to Michael, Peter's co-worker. When he directly brought up Jonathan, Joan said that he had nothing to do with it, but Bowdish then asked about Christopher Porco. When Detective Bowdish asked again, Joan nodded to prove that he was involved, but her answers stayed the same. Because Joan gave the cops important information, they focused their investigation on Christopher, who was their first suspect. Joan was taken to the hospital right away for a long surgery, and Peter's body was sent for a full autopsy. At the same time, the cops kept looking over the whole crime scene. At first, the police thought the crime might have been a theft, but when they looked more closely, they saw that nothing had been taken from the house except for some drawers that had been taken out. There was no sign of Joan's purse or its contents in the dining room. Detective Bowdish thought this meant that someone from the Porco family or someone who had access to the house was involved. There was no proof to back up this claim. Even though the cops looked over the whole crime scene, they only found Peter and Joan's fingerprints. At the center of all the chaos was the question of how Peter was able to keep doing what he was doing in the morning after taking 16 hits from an axe. When the autopsy reports came back, they told us the answer to this question. Analysis of Peter's body revealed that the attack had severely damaged his brain. He had a lot of problems with the neural cortex, which is the part of his brain that handles higher processes like thinking, language, and reasoning. The paleocortex, which handles basic instincts and habitual behaviors, stayed in the lower part of his brain. This explains how Peter was able to get up and do his morning tasks even though he was badly hurt and almost dead. His instincts and deeply established habits let him do things he knew how to do without thinking about them. Was Christopher the one who killed? Murders of Peter and Joan Porco quickly got around, catching many people's attention. A Times Union writer called Christopher in Rochester, New York, to inform him about the attack on his parents. Since Christopher had never heard of the event before, he was shocked and confused. He asked the reporter for more information, but she said she would call him back when she could. Christopher had been waiting for the call with bated breath in his college room, but the phone did not ring. Eventually, he gathered himself and decided to contact the local police near his parents' house to ascertain the details of the incident. He introduced himself over the phone, explaining that the Times Union had called, stating that his parents were found dead that afternoon. He emphasized that he did not have any information and that he was at school in Rochester. The operator inquired if he was in Rochester, to which Christopher confirmed. The operator asked for the phone number, which he provided. The operator further inquired if he was in a dorm, and Christopher confirmed. The operator asked for the name of the dorm, to which Christopher replied it was called Monroe. The operator asked if there was a room number, and he responded that there wasn't. The operator assured Christopher that they would try to find someone he could talk to, despite not being certain who was in the office, and instructed him to hold the line. Christopher expressed his gratitude by saying, "Thank you." The operator continued, "One of my detectives is out on the road right now, Detective Rudolph. We are going to have him call you back momentarily." Christopher acknowledged with a simple "okay." He also asked to confirm the phone number, which the operator did. The operator concluded by informing Christopher, "You will be expecting a call from Detective Rudolph. He is going to give you a call right back." Christopher expressed thanks. Detective Rudolph called Chris, and he told him about the attack on his parents. But there were problems with the connection, so the call ended. Detective Rudolph asked Christopher to come to the police station for further discussion, and Christopher agreed. When the operator called Christopher back, Christopher explained that he would be accompanied by his uncle John Balzano. He mentioned that his last visit to his parents was approximately 3 weeks ago on a weekend, but couldn't recall the exact day. They discussed an email Christopher sent to his dad regarding college loan matters. The operator provided Christopher with their pager and cell phone numbers, ensuring they could be reached when they arrived. Christopher expressed his gratitude. Christopher asked how his mother was doing, but his voice did not sound at all worried. Usually a kid would freak out when they heard something like this, but Christopher did not seem to care. John Bolzano, his uncle, picked him up from college and drove him to Bethlehem, which took about 4 hours. The paramedics did everything they could to save Joan Porco, but her injuries made it hard for them to put an air mask over her face. Joan was having surgery when Christopher got to the hospital. Around him were hugs from family and friends who had gathered in the waiting room. Christopher was shocked when a family friend told him that he was a suspect in the attack. Christopher could not understand why anyone would think he could hurt his parents. Detective Bowdish then came up to him and asked to talk to him. He agreed to go to the police station to be questioned. Christopher stayed polite and cooperative during the questioning. He told the police that he had been going to see his folks every once in a while, but had not stayed with them in 3 weeks. He strongly denied having anything to do with the attack and gave an explanation for what happened the night of the attack. Christopher said that at 9:30 p.m., he went to dinner with a friend in Rochester and then went back to his room on campus. During the evening, he talked to his girlfriend, Sarah Fisher, online and watched a movie in the college common room until he passed out on the couch. Christopher gave the cops his permission to test his blood and fingerprints. He even took off his shirt so they could look for any small wounds that might show he was involved in the attack. Investigators looked at his clothes and his yellow Jeep, but they could not find any proof that he was involved with the crime. On top of that, the crime scene did not have any blood or fingerprints from anyone else but Peter and Joan. The murder tool, an axe, did not have any fingerprints on it, which is strange. investigators were not able to find any proof that Christopher was involved with the attack. The police questioned Christopher for 6 hours, but there was not enough proof against him to keep him there. He wanted to visit his mother in the hospital. She had a long surgery, and she was sleeping because of it. This visit was meaningful to him. Suddenly, after 3 weeks, Joan woke up from her sleep. During the attack, Joan lost her left eye, had a piece of her head cut off, and will always have scars on her face. Also, something was wrong with her voice, and she could only whisper. Despite having serious injuries, Joan managed to stay alive against all chances. One big problem, though, was that Joan could not remember the night of the attack. She remembered things she did before that day, like working in the yard and going to church, but she could not remember what she did the night of November 15, 2004. It looked like fate was keeping the attacker's name secret. The most important thing was that Joan could not remember naming Christopher as her attacker and said she had never done so. Deep down, she thought Christopher was not guilty. The police had to stop looking at Christopher as a possible killer of Peter and Joan once Joan made it clear that Christopher had nothing to do with the attack. So, in order to solve the case, the cops turned their attention to other evidence and possible suspects. Police found that a man named Patrick DeLucia had made a serious threat against Peter Porco. Patrick had lost control of his children in court before the New York State Supreme Court, where Peter worked. Peter took the threat very seriously and chose to keep a gun next to his bed to keep himself safe. But as time went on, and nothing happened again, Peter became less worried. He finally put the gun away in a closet because he thought the threat was over. Person informed him that he was going to get a gun and kill the judge and Peter Porco. Authorities were sure that Patrick, who had threatened Peter, was just waiting for the right time to get even. They thought that he struck Peter and Joan on the night of November 15, 2004, to get even with them. The cops quickly found Patrick and asked him a lot of questions about where he was during the attack. But Patrick had a strong alibi that showed he was not participating. He was not a suspect because the cops could not find any other proof or reasons to link him to the crime. That is when they learned about the anonymous letter, which could give them new ideas for their research. The Times-Union newspaper's offices in Albany, a city north of Delmar, got an envelope with white powder inside it. When someone on staff opened it, a white powder came out of one of the corners. They called the police right away about the strange package. Inside the package was a letter from someone who said they killed Peter Porco. The letter was a big clue in the case, but the police were not sure if it was real. They did not understand why a killer would come forward and tell the police not to focus on easy suspects. It looked like someone wanted to shift the focus of the investigation to serial killers while possibly hiding their own involvement. The police had to think carefully about the letter's motives and credibility while continuing their search for the killer. Even after tests, the police could not figure out where the letter came from. The white powder was safe, and they could not find any fingerprints or other clues that would lead them to the person who sent it. When asked about the letter, a police lieutenant said that he did not see it as a breakthrough in the case, but rather as another interesting avenue they were looking into. Investigations revealed that Peter had strange ties to the criminal underworld. His uncle Frank Porco was a known mobster in New York 30 years before the attack on Peter and Joan. Peter's uncle Frank had attended their wedding carrying a gun and wearing expensive jewelry. There were rumors that Frank had betrayed his fellow mobsters, and Peter knew about this and was about to do something about it. This made some people think that Peter was planning to kill Frank. Further investigation showed that the axe used was not a fireman's axe, but a regular one from Peter's garage that they had bought at a nearby hardware store. He was in prison because he was not a snitch. You know, he was offered the chance to work with the police to avoid prison, but he didn't, so he ended up in prison. Frankie was already in prison for being a loan shark, and there were rumors that he might work with Arthur. During the investigation, it was proven that Frankie was in federal prison at the time of the attack on Peter. This meant that he could not have been the killer. With all the suspects out of the picture, the police were back to the beginning of their search. They were frustrated because they did not have any strong evidence or leads that could help them find the real killer. New information made the police wonder if they had missed any important details in the case. They could not shake the feeling that they were missing something important. Could there be a key clue hidden in the Porco family's history? Desperate to find any details they had missed, they decided to look into the family's history in great detail. They wanted to learn everything about their past in the hopes of finding any information that would help them solve the case. They found out that Peter had reported a burglary 2 years before. In 2002, it looked like someone broke into their house through a garage window and stole Peter's laptops. When they looked at the house on November 15, 2004, they saw a window in the garage that was partially open and had a cut screen. When they tried to open it further, they could not because Peter had put bolts in the window frame to keep it closed. To their surprise, the police found that Christopher had stolen the laptops back in 2002. On November 28, 2002, while Christopher was home for Thanksgiving, someone broke into the Porco home and stole 2 of Peter's laptops. Then, on July 21, 2003, while Christopher was again at home, someone broke in and stole Joan's laptop and other electronics. This made the police suspicious. The police found that Christopher had an eBay account and found proof that all the stolen items had been sold through that account. To confirm their suspicions, they went to San Diego and got back Joan's stolen laptop from the person who had bought it. It turned out that Christopher used the eBay account to do more than just sell stolen items. He also used it to scam people by selling something on eBay, getting paid, and then pretending to be his older brother. As the investigation into the attack on Peter and Joan continued, this information became very important. Christopher was once again the focus of the police. It was clear that Christopher was not as innocent as he said he was, and the detectives were determined to find out everything they could about him. They thought there was more to the story than what at first seemed, and they wanted to find out the whole truth about what happened. Christopher had been having trouble in school, which was disappointing for his parents who were looking forward to his success at the University of Rochester. Christopher seemed more interested in having fun than studying, which got him kicked out of school and put on suspension after the fall of 2003. His parents tried to get him to join the Reserve Officers Training Corps program like their other son Jonathan did, but Christopher refused. It is common for universities to give students second chances to improve their grades and academic standing. Christopher relied on the hope of second chances and decided to give it another try by enrolling at Hudson Valley Community College in the spring of 2004. He thought that success there would pave the way for future efforts. Unfortunately, Christopher faced another setback. While in England as part of his parents' study abroad program, he received an email from his mother, Joan, expressing her disappointment with his academic performance at Hudson Valley Community College. In the email, she mentioned that he had just left and stated that she couldn't believe what she saw on his report card. Joan referred to the saying, "3 strikes and you're out," and requested an explanation. Christopher's lack of response to the email caused his parents to become both angry and concerned about his well-being. While Christopher was in England, he eventually found time to write a message to his father, Peter. In the message, he confidently blamed the college registrar for their incompetence and for messing things up. He admitted to making a mistake and getting a low grade of C on a test, but he told his father not to worry because he would take care of everything when he got home. However, Christopher's actions when he got home were the opposite of what he said. Christopher lied to his parents when he said that he had been accepted back into the University of Rochester. He said that the university had messed up and wrongly graded one of his finals, which had a big effect on his overall grade. Luckily, the mistake was found and fixed, so Christopher could go back to school and the university would pay for his tuition. After hearing this, Peter and Joan felt better because they knew Christopher would be able to continue his studies at the University of Rochester. Just like they had hoped, they got him ready and sent him back to the university, expecting him to finish his semester there. But the truth was very different from what they thought. The university had never asked Christopher to return, and they had never offered to pay for his tuition. So how did he get back in? Christopher took matters into his own hands by making fake transcripts from the community college. These records made it look like he had completed several semesters with good grades, which meant he was eligible to return to the University of Rochester. The university did not know about the lie, but Christopher was able to get back in. But Christopher had a tough time paying for school. He could not ask his parents for money because he had already lied to them by saying that the university would pay for everything. You might think that he would be responsible and work hard at a part-time job to save up enough money to pay for his own tuition, but Christopher had other ideas. He chose to lie again. Christopher asked his parents for their financial information and a co-signature so that he could get a $2,000 loan. Christopher took the financial information and co-signed loan documents to Citibank, but he lied to his parents and got a $31,000 loan instead. He used this money to pay for his tuition as planned. Christopher did not stop being dishonest there, though. Not long after that, he faked his father's signature again to get the money to buy a flashy, bright yellow Jeep Wrangler, which gave him the luxurious lifestyle he had always wanted. Things were going well for Christopher until Citibank called Peter to talk about paying back the loans, which made him aware of the fraud. Following the call, Peter was shocked to learn that a large amount of money had been taken out in his name, including the $16,000 loan Christopher was said to have co-signed for the Jeep Wrangler. He thought Christopher only wanted a $2,000 loan, but this new information made him very angry. Peter tried to get in touch with Christopher many times, but his son ignored his calls and texted other people. Peter could not hold back his anger any longer, so he wrote Christopher an email with a strong warning and even a threat of legal action. This gave Christopher one last chance to take responsibility for his actions. "I want you to know that if you abuse my credit again, I will have to file forgery affidavits in order to disclaim liability. That includes the Citibank college loan if you try to reactivate it or use my credit to obtain any I have to go to court against you." Christopher did not respond to the email and stopped talking to his parents, which made them even more worried about his health. 7 days before the terrible attack on Peter and Joan, Joan sent Christopher an email in which she explained how worried she was about his mental health and urged him to get in touch with them, stressing how much they loved him and wanted him to be successful and happy. When detectives found out that Peter knew shocking information, the investigation took a shocking turn. The Porco family had life insurance policies worth a staggering $1 million. If they died, the money from the policies would go directly to their sons. What made things even more suspicious was Christopher's recent visit to a financial counselor, which happened just 1 month before the attack in October 2004. This brought up many important questions, such as where was Christopher? So, the police went to the University of Rochester in hopes of finding the answers they were looking for. They were determined to find out where Christopher was on the night of the crime, so they decided to talk to the students in his dorm, Monroe, to find out more. Surprisingly, all of them, including his fraternity brothers, said that Christopher was not with them that night. They said that they had a movie night. Christopher's friend Jason came forward with important information that turned the investigation in an unexpected direction. He said that Christopher had told him he had to meet his sick aunt, which was why he could not go to the movie night, and that Christopher had also said he had to park his muddy Jeep behind the dorm. This made us wonder who this aunt was that Christopher said he had to meet. Christopher did not have any aunts living near his dorm. The big question was where Christopher went that fateful night. To their surprise, surveillance footage from the campus showed a yellow Jeep Wrangler leaving the campus at 10:30 p.m. On the night of November 14, 2004, the exact time Christopher said he was asleep on the couch, the Jeep returned the next morning around 8:30 a.m., just hours after the attack on November 15, 2004. As the police questioned the people who worked at the toll booths, the investigation took an interesting turn. John Fallon, who was a toll collector at the first toll booth, remembered giving a toll ticket to a young man driving a yellow Jeep Wrangler with big tires at 10:45 p.m. on November 14, 2004. John was a huge fan of Jeeps, so he could not help but admire the car. The detectives then went to the second targeted toll booth on their way to Albany. Karen Russell, a toll collector 9 miles from the Porco's house and 228 miles from Christopher's dorm, remembered a young man with brown hair cutting into her lane at Albany's exit 24 around 1:51 a.m. She also saw the same yellow Jeep going back to Rochester as it went by her toll booth at 5:15 a.m. But there was also someone else who had seen the yellow Jeep in the early hours of November 15, 2004. It was dark outside when Marshall Gaki, a resident of the area, got ready to go to work at 4 a.m. As he turned on his car's headlights, these shone on his neighbor's property and revealed a shocking sight: a yellow Jeep Wrangler parked in the driveway. Detectives needed this important piece of evidence because they saw the Jeep in the Porco's driveway at the time of the attack. Surprisingly, the timing of the Jeep's departure from campus, its trip through the toll booth, and its arrival at the Porco's home all fit perfectly with the time of the attack. The puzzle was finally coming together. Police have made a shocking discovery based on evidence and eyewitness accounts. They have a perfect timeline of when and how the attack happened. According to their investigation, Christopher left campus in his yellow Jeep around 10:30 p.m. on the fateful night of November 14, 2004. He went through the first toll booth leaving Rochester at about 10:45 p.m. and entering Albany around 1:51 a.m. He sneaked into the Porco's house by hiding the spare key under a pot near the front door. Once he was inside, he carefully put the key back where it belonged. His first job was to turn off the burglar alarm using the master code, which would only be known by family members. Investigators made a scary discovery while carefully going through the crime scene on the day of the attack. The burglar alarm had been broken, but oddly, it had already been turned off around 2:14 a.m. The time of deactivation was written in a box in the basement, which Christopher probably did not know. After turning off the alarm, he went to the garage and got the murder weapon, an axe. He then quietly made his way upstairs to Peter and Joan's room and attacked Peter, hitting him 16 times with the axe in a horrible act. The sound of the attack woke Joan up, and she was shocked and horrified as she saw Christopher attack her husband. Despite Joan's attempts to save herself, Christopher killed her. Then he went downstairs and purposely broke the burglar alarm and the garage window to make it look like someone had broken in through the window, hence the name burglary gone wrong. However, Christopher did not know that Peter had already locked the windows with bolts, thus making it impossible for anyone to enter. Christopher carefully cleaned himself and made sure there were no blood or fingerprints in the house. At 4:54 a.m., he cut the phone line so that no one could call or text him. He did this to get rid of any witnesses or evidence that could connect him to the crime. With his carefully thought out plan in hand, Christopher quickly left the Porco's house and, at 5:12 a.m., re-entered the New York State Thruway, heading back towards Rochester. As the morning went on, around 8:30 a.m., cameras on the roof of a medical center caught a yellow Jeep Wrangler driving toward the campus. Timeline of events fit together perfectly, adding to the evidence that Christopher was the main suspect in the crime. But the investigators ran into two problems. First, they had to figure out if the yellow Jeep really belonged to Christopher. They turned to video analysis for help. James Kennedy, an expert at solving mysteries caught on surveillance cameras, used advanced computers to process the security camera footage. James Kennedy carefully looked at the video and found some interesting things about the yellow Jeep. He saw mud carefully stuck to the passenger side door, a unique parking sticker with a horn design on the window, and a political sticker that stood out on the back tire cover. When he compared these things to the pictures that the police had taken of Christopher's Jeep on the day of the attack, it was clear that everything fit together perfectly. Investigators had another problem. They did not have solid proof that Christopher was the one who drove the yellow Jeep that night, because this was such an important case. They had to look at every detail. When they looked closely at photos of Christopher's Jeep, they saw a significant clue: an easy pass like tags stuck on the floor. The investigators thought it was possible that Christopher may have paid the highway tolls in cash on purpose, cleverly avoiding using an easy pass. There are different exits on toll roads like the Thruway, and the amount you have to pay depends on how far you go. When you enter the toll road, the attendant gives you a ticket. When you get to your exit, you put the ticket in a slot, and it tells you how much you have to pay based on how far you went. At the time Christopher crossed the toll booth, only 12 cars had gone through. The police took all 12 toll tickets and sent them to a forensic lab to be tested and analyzed. They were looking for any kind of skin cells because if your hands are sweaty and you touch a toll ticket, DNA from sources like epithelial cells could be transferred to the ticket. However, the police did not find any fingerprints or DNA evidence. But with the other evidence they had against Christopher, they were sure that he was the person who had gone through the toll booth and arrived at Porco's house the night of the murder. With these pieces of evidence, they were sure that Christopher was involved in the crime and could carry out the attack. Christopher was charged with the murder of his father and attempted murder of his mother on November 4, 2005, almost a year after the attack. However, what happened next was not out of the ordinary. Christopher admitted that the yellow Jeep seen on the surveillance video was his, but he said he was just moving it to park off campus. He also said that when he got back to the dorm lounge, his frat brothers had already left. Christopher argued that the campus surveillance cameras only showed him leaving, not going home or to the thruway. He also asked why he was driving a flashy yellow Jeep if he was trying to do something bad. Christopher said that the surveillance video did not show where he was going. Christopher's lawyer, Van San, told investigator McDermott that the video showed that Christopher left campus, but it did not show where he went. McDermott brought up the important testimony of Marshall Goki, who saw Christopher's Jeep in the Porco's driveway at 4 a.m. McDermott was sure that it was Christopher's car, which meant that Christopher was at the Porco home during the attack. Lastly, John Porco, the main witness, said that she did not remember what happened that night and did not remember nodding to show that her son was the attacker. In a shocking move, Joan officially said that her son was innocent, calling the prosecution's whole case against him into question. Jonathan Porco was also at the trial and told the judge that Christopher was to blame for killing his father. The police said that Joan's nod proved that her son was the killer, but the defense team says the prosecution's case was weak because there was no forensic evidence linking Chris to the crime. For example, there were no bloody footprints or fingerprints that linked Chris to the scene, and there was no forensic evidence. According to the defense attorney, Terry Kinlan, the surveillance video was not a problem. He said that Christopher parked his Jeep off campus and then wandered around until around 3:30 a.m. When he went back to the dorm lounge and fell asleep, Caitlin said that he knew why the master code was used to turn off the alarm at the Porco's house. He said that Peter Porco often did this to let the dog go outside and sometimes for himself. A month after being charged, Christopher was freed on bail thanks to the support of his family and friends, who were sure he was innocent. During this time, he stayed with Elena Fort, a veterinarian he had worked with for a long time, and who loved him like a son. The trial began on June 27, 2006, 19 months after the brutal attack that killed Peter and changed Joan's life forever. It was heartbreaking to see Joan walk into the courtroom with her own son Christopher, who was being accused of the violent crime. The prosecution and defense fought for 7 weeks, laying out the bloody details of this circumstantial case. Over 80 witnesses gave their accounts of what happened, shedding light on the terrible events. Paramedics Kevin Robert and Dennis Wood said that Joan Porco nodded when they asked her if Christopher was the one who attacked her. However, Joan's neurologist, Dr. Mary Dimbavi, told the jurors that Joan probably could not fully understand the questions because she was hurt so badly. The prosecution called 9 of Christopher's frat brothers as witnesses to challenge his alibi. Rossi, one of the investigators, said that they brought in everyone who was in the lounge that night, and they all confirmed that Porco was not there. To find out if Christopher drove to Porco's house, the jury heard from 2 toll collectors who said they saw a yellow Jeep that looked a lot like Christopher's on the night of the murder. A forensic pathologist reminded the jury that Christopher did not have any blood on him from the crime scene. The prosecutors gave reasons for this, saying that Christopher probably did not get much blood on him during the crime, and that he had enough time inside the house to change his clothes. Shanks, the defense attorney, strongly disagreed with the prosecution's claims. He said they did not make sense because if someone hits someone with an axe 15 to 20 times, blood should be on the attacker. Chinks said Christopher's lack of blood was proof that he did not commit the crime. When asked what he thought about the trial, Christopher was positive about how things were going and how things would turn out. He wanted to send a message to the jury, even though he was not going to testify. He told them not to jump to conclusions and to carefully look at all the evidence. Christopher thought that when they did this, they would see that things did not make sense and that he was innocent. After the 7-week trial, both the prosecution and the defense expected the jury to take a long time to decide. To their surprise, the jury came to a decision in less than 6 hours. Christopher was found guilty of all charges on August 10, 2006. On December 12, 2006, Judge Jeffrey Berry gave Porco a minimum sentence of 50 years to life in prison for each count. Christopher would be eligible for parole in 2052. After hearing the verdict, Christopher did not show much emotion. When asked about it, he said that his lawyer told him not to show much emotion no matter what happened. Joan got there too late to hear the verdict about her son's fate. When Christopher and his lawyer sat down, Christopher's first request to the lawyer was for her to tell his mother the verdict. Christopher was clearly upset, but by the time they got back to the courtroom, Christopher was no longer upset. According to the prosecutor David Rossi, Christopher believed he was cleverer than everyone else when he committed the crime. However, he was mistaken in thinking it was a flawless plan. The guilty verdict, although adding more sorrow to Joan Porco's life, ensured that justice was served. After 16 long years, an interview was finally arranged with Christopher Porco to discuss the case and verdict. It was a challenging process to gain access to the prison and conduct the interview, but finally, in early 2023, the opportunity arose. One thing that was evident from talking to Christopher Porco in prison was that his mother remained his conscious supporter. The final question posed to Christopher was whether, in the event of a new trial and the prosecution's desire to avoid further proceedings, he would be willing to plead guilty to the attack in exchange for being released with credit for time served. But did anyone, either in the DA's office or high up in the Bethlehem Police Department, realize that they didn't have a warrant for information that they believed was going to be critical? The lawyers for Oracle will have to wait a few months to find out if their legal plan worked. In the meantime, Porco is in the 17th year of a 50-year to life term. It sounds like your mom is still behind you, and she is without a doubt the toughest person you will ever meet. We talk every day, and she has definitely taken the brunt of this. We have gotten through it together. We are each other's support system, but she has been through a lot more than I ever will. Even though Christopher has been in prison for years, people are still not sure if he is guilty or innocent. What are your thoughts on this case? Did Christopher attack Peter and John Porco, or was it someone else? Let us know in the comments below. Also, do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more interesting true crime stories. Until next time, stay safe. Christopher Porco talked about the last 16 years of his life, including his time in prison and his thoughts on the case that had taken up all of his time.